This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Welcome back to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. I am now joined here in the studio by Dr. Talia Sagiv, who teaches sociology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She is here to talk about her new book entitled On the Fault Line, Israelis of Mixed Ethnicity. It recently came out in Hebrew. Hello, Talia, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello, Gilad. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Now, your book touches upon a hot potato here in the Israeli debate at large. It's not a new issue.
True.
The people that you focus on are in many ways the realization of the Zionist dream, the gathering of the Jewish diasporas into one melting pot here in the Jewish state, that within a few generations, so the official line went in the early years of the state, within a few generations they would undo the great differences between the different origins and traditions and create one homogeneous Jewish ethnicity,
Exactly.
in inverted commas.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, like you say in your book, 1 in 5 young Israelis today is of mixed ethnicity, that is Ashkenazi and Sephardi in them. Sephardi or Mizrahi, we'll get to that in a minute because we need to hone in on the terminology. But their situation, as you describe in great detail, is far from being trouble-free. So what are really the problems and dilemmas that these people are facing?
I'll start, with your permission, with the question of the melting pot. I wanted to prove that the melting pot worked. I myself, my father is of Sephardi descent and my mother's German. And
that was your hypothesis.
And
when you start your point of departure for this study.
Exactly. As a student, I read many articles about the inequality in Israel between Sephardi or Mizrahi and Ashkenazim, and I thought somebody has to do research that will prove that this is behind us. This is not relevant. That children like me or grown-ups like me that are half and half don't feel that there's any kind of inequality. So I was out to prove that this is behind us, this entire ethnic question.
Little did you know.
Very little did I know that when I will interview these people, they will give me an entirely different answer. Now, I have to be very clear on one thing. They do say that they are the real Israelis. They feel that they have lived up to the dream. One of the teachers I interviewed said, "Where will I go back to? Isfahan, Tehran. This is my place. I am the true Zionist." But at a later stage of the interview, almost all of the people I interviewed talk about the fact that they have to choose. They cannot be both. And the way they look, their last name, where they grew up, will tell them, although they're 50-50, if they're more this or more that. Moreover, the interesting thing that I found out is that they really want to talk about culture and not class. They say being Ashkenazi or Sephardi only affects you in the way that you behave in a funeral, in the way that you want your wedding to be, in the kind of food or music that you consume. But it's not a class issue. But when you go into deeper stages of the interview, they say there is a class issue after all.
Yeah, because, okay, so let's tackle these one by one. Okay. You said that these people, all of them, without exception, feel that they can't be both. They can't be Ashkenazi as well as Sephardi. But the whole point is, can they not be neither? Just have,
just be plain Israeli?
Yeah.
No, it's impossible to be plain Israeli. Out of 70 people I spoke to, 6 said that they're plain Israeli. All the others,
Right.
and I suspect that some of them were not entirely truthful. All the others say, when I say to people, I'm just Israeli, I'm not either or, the people around you, when you come to school, when you reach the army, when you go to get a job, will ask you questions. They'll say, okay, but what are you more? They will not accept the 50-50 identity that you try to show. They'll judge you upon your last name or the way you talk or the music, the CDs that you have in your car will help another person decide if you're this or that.
So it's just impossible to escape that a label, or ethnic label in Israel of the, I wouldn't say even the beginning of the 21st century, because we're well into the 21st century already. But this is something that really has not subsided at all.
Well, it has changed. And I think one of the most interesting things I show in the book, although it's a very problematic subject, is written in a very light Hebrew. I think anyone can read it and enjoy it. One of the interesting things I show is how stereotypes have changed. 60s, 70s stereotypes about being Mizrahi were very harsh. And the stories that I hear from the older people I interviewed are they always talk about how they wanted to hide their Mizrahi half and wanted to pass as Ashkenazis. When I talk to the younger people, they talk about how proud they are of their Mizrahi half, and sometimes even prouder of the Mizrahi half than the Ashkenazi. So things have changed. They've changed to the better because negative stereotypes about being Mizrahi have softened. But on the other side, we have created negative stereotypes about being Ashkenazi as well. I don't know if you've ever come across such stereotypes.
For example?
When I talk to older Israelis that are half and half, they talk about Mizrahi as being primitive, as not really
older,
terrible
you mean
things.
People in the
people
middle,
in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s that I've interviewed. There's one person I interviewed that talked about how the entire family from his father's side treated his the family on his mother's side as being primitive, having no culture, having no skills of life. And this wounded him for life. He's 65 and he's still talking about how the Ashkenazi family tried to pay off his mother not to marry his father. I don't hear such stories when I interview people who are younger. Far from it. They even talk about how they have to hide the Ashkenazi side, because today being Ashkenazi means being easy to bluff, being not warm-hearted. All sorts of stereotypes.
I thought, to my mind, at least in my experience, being Ashkenazi means being snobbish, being upper middle class, looking down on people, etc.
That as well. But it's also about being not as good as the Mizrahis in conversation of day-to-day conversations, of being warm, of being able to host well.
Being able to cook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the question that I find interesting here is who won? Because I read people write about my book, and Hanan Shaked and Yediot wrote that the book proves that the Mizrahim have won, because if younger people prefer saying that they're Mizrahi, well, what more proof do you need? Other people who read the book, there's a piece in Ha'oketz writing about how my book proves that there's still a clear hierarchy between Ashkenazim and Mizrahim. And I think they both, have a point. They both have a point.
Precisely. That's exactly what I want to say. But also, it all boils down to that thing that it's still a very, very contentious issue. I mean, who won means that there's some kind of contest, even a war.
Exactly, and the Mizrahim are still losing.
And so the underlying premise of your book is that it is still a very touchy subject.
It is. I think one of the things that took me by surprise is how angry people are that I wrote this book, that I'm talking about this, as if my writing about it will bring it alive, this dangerous shit, do we call it in Hebrew?
Yeah, the ethnic demon.
Exactly, thank you. And you don't get angry about something that doesn't exist. If we talk about the difference between communist Israelis and non-communist Israelis, everybody will laugh. Nobody will get angry.
Because what you're doing it in a rather sophisticated way for those who actually try to sweep it under the carpet. Because those who try to bring the ethnic demon back into center stage are normally capitalizing on the underprivileged 100% Mizrahi who are underprivileged, and like you said, we'll get to that in a minute. The ethnic identity still runs along very clear socio-economic lines, and vice versa.
Exactly. But Professor Momi Dehan from the Hebrew University proved that there are still gaps in education, in income. They're closing, but they're not closing rapidly. They're not closing.
And those who were supposed to be, like I think you said in your book, the glue of the melting pot, those who are of mixed ethnicity, actually are those who help bringing this issue back into life?
In a way, because they're much more aware of their ethnic identity than people who are fully Ashkenazi or fully Mizrahi. And I think that most of them have this feeling of being a child of divorced parents because they can understand the Ashkenazi story or narrative about how everybody was poor. I can... If I had an opinion every time that somebody said my parents came from Romania and they were sprayed with DDT as well, all these stories that try to say everybody did their best and we should not blame the Ashkenazi for whatever they did. And on the other side, you hear more and more stories about Mizrahi people still being treated differently in higher education, in job interviews, till this very day. So the two narratives clash in a way that it's almost impossible to be half and half and not to choose a side.
And your case is, of course, your personal case is, of course, very pertinent because, our listeners can't see, but you are an Israeli of mixed origin, even though your physique doesn't suggest any of that. Your dad is Mizrahi, but you yourself are blonde, have fair skin, and also blue eyes, glasses. You teach at the Hebrew University. Everything that makes a good Ashkenazi. So tell me a bit about how. I mean, of course, it nurtured your research, your own personal experience, as often happens with sociologists and social scientists. But tell me a bit about how it actually was in practice.
I grew up in a very Zionist house, and I was always told that I am very beautiful. A lot of the mixed children, by the way, are told that they're the most beautiful that they can be because you are both. But the fact is that the way you look and your last name will affect the way that people treat you. When I was 5 years... Would you have time to go into the story?
Sure, yeah.
When I was 5-year-old, we were at JFK, and my mother took me to the toilets. And an hour later, I needed to go again, and my dad went with me. And I didn't want to go into the men's room. And my dad insisted, and people called the police because a black man is dragging a blonde little girl into the men's bathroom. And my mother had to come and sort it out. And that was the first time I realized there's something special or different about me. Later in life...
But that was in America.
That was in America.
Yeah.
That was in America. But
it's important to point out.
Yes. And when we talk about mixed marriage, there's great difference. There's not really a mix. I won't go into the differences. But later in life, when I was 16, I dated this Ashkenazi person who was very happy to date me because his ex-girlfriend was Yemenite, and I was kind of an upgrade. Yeah. And I was very angry. And when I came to dinner Friday night, I spoke of my Persian origin, and I could see his parents being extremely unhappy about this. And that was one of the first times that I understood that there's more to it, that this is not something that we can leave behind us.
Because in your in the environment that you grew up in, it was somewhat neutral. And then when you came out into society, you realized that it's not as neutral as you were brought up to believe.
Exactly. I grew up in a house that thought this is entirely... irrelevant. Both of my parents have education, have good jobs. My dad's a vegetarian, which is something that most Sefardis
frown upon.
Exactly. And I didn't know of any of the stereotypes. But then, like most of the people I interviewed, you go into school and people ask you what you are, and you come to the army, it's military service. This is a big thing.
What about your maternal grandparents? Did they approve of your father when your mum just met him?
I think one of the most interesting parts of the book is how people discuss the way their parents met and how their grandparents... this is a funny story, actually, because my mother was kind of worried before the parents met for the first time. So she told her parents that my dad's parents are very primitive. They sit on the floor. They don't use cutlery. And then when they met my grandparents and they were reasonably okay, they gasped in relief and everything was well, and they loved my father.
Because it takes a lot of courage. I don't know, did you interview those the parents as well, the Ashkenazi parents? Because back in the day, it took a lot of courage to do that. It was a very, very brave political statement to marry out, in a way. It was,
and we're talking in the late 70s of less than 5% of mixed marriages. So it was brave, and there were severe costs to marrying outside. Nowadays, and I think this is one of the optimistic things that I found, it's easier. It's much easier. It's less of a a dramatic issue if you marry someone of a different ethnicity, but it still is. There's this reporter that I interviewed, and he said that his best friend is dating a Moroccan girl, but he told his parents, very rich parents, Ashkenazi parents, that he's dating a Moroccan, but she doesn't look Moroccan, he doesn't behave Moroccan. And he said to me, if anybody would speak of my daughter this way, I'd kill him.
Sure.
So we'd like to think that these stereotypes are not here, but they are very much engraved in us.
A bit about your theoretical framework. Of course, you are a sociologist. This is not just a bundle of impressions. You did use some theoretical model to support your argument. Now, my question is: does the question of ethnicity, Sephardim and Ashkenazim is something that is very, very culture specific to Israel. Does it have any kind of universal applicability according to any parallel cases in other places in the world, etc.?
Yes and no. The Israeli case is different because Jewish people marrying Jewish people does not. It doesn't fall into the category of mixed race. So in this case, we are special, but it's not that special because the minute you have two ethnicities and there's some kind of cultural hierarchy between them, there'll always be a power game. And for example, I write in the book about very interesting research about girls who have a father or mother that is American and the other side is Japanese.
Right.
And they clearly say how the American side is better, is the one that they want to show. They think they're prettier because they look like the American parent. So it's interesting to compare these things because the question is always what these children of mixed ethnicity can tell us about the culture in large. I don't care that much about the half-halves. Yeah. I care more about what they can show us that happens in society as all. Now, when I look into the eyes of a 10-year-old that says that when she goes to school, to enlist or anything else, parents' meetings, she will always take her Ashkenazi mother and not her Moroccan dad. She's 10. Yeah. When a 23-year-old tells me that when he goes to university, he talks about his father being Ashkenazi, but when he goes to fix his car, he will always bring out the Yemenite side in him because he thinks that there's a clear hierarchy. Because if you're Ashkenazi in the university, but you're Mizrahi when you go to fix your car.
But then again, it comes back to what we said in the beginning of this Pygmalion or chameleon effect that they can put on and take off their identities, as they wish.
There's a great similarity.
But what I'm saying is, it actually serves them here.
It does. There's a great similarity between these halves and halves, these mixed Israelis and immigrants, because you feel at home at two cultures. You know how to behave at parties, at funerals, as I said before, but also, and this is something I did not expect, I told you before that I thought I will call the book The Chameleon. And I will be able to write about these people who feel it comfortable in any home in Israel. But what happens, and this is again very similar in immigrants, is that you're never fully at home anywhere. I talked to this 29-year-old, he's unemployed at the moment, and he told me, I think it's healthier to be 100% something because you know where you belong and you don't feel this loyalty complex all the time. What narrative do I belong to? Am I a traitor to my mother or father because I think this way?
Is your study groundbreaking in this way? Has this question been studied before?
It is. There are two breakthroughs here. One, nobody ever interviewed the mixed Israelis. Right. Because the assumption was that they are not, in a study by Tzfati, they're called the ones who have no...
Yeah, they are post-ethnic.
Post-ethnic, exactly. So it's groundbreaking because nobody interviewed them. Right. And this is one methodological point that is interesting. The second is that I show that this is not just a problem of class. That there's also a question of culture. And this is so delicate and so explosive that hardly anybody wanted to write about it. If you read articles in 70s, 80s, 90s, when they write about Ashkenazi and Mizrahi, most of the time the question of culture is put aside because they want to write about inequality. And
because it's not politically correct?
It is not politically correct, and I
what do you mean exactly by culture? That the customs are different, and for example, I don't know, you mentioned weddings earlier, so is that what you mean by culture?
Yes, most of the people I interviewed try to explain how the difference between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi is the way you treat religion, the way you use language, the way you celebrate holidays, and so forth. And it seems at a certain point I was confused because I thought, wait, maybe we're at the point of looking at these two groups as the difference between French people and English people. Different, but equal. Yeah. But when you read very closely between the lines, you see that every time they talk about a cultural difference, there's a hierarchy.
Right.
Because when these people use listen to this music and the others, you talk about Ashkenazi as being more sophisticated, as being... The bottom line is this: being Mizrahi puts you beyond the fence of having less intellect or less intelligence. And when you're Ashkenazi, it's clear that you will go to university or that you have more vocabulary. And when
it's
you're
clear
Mizrahi,
to whom? To the person himself, or to the society?
This is the stigma. This is a stereotype. And when you're Mizrahi, you have to prove that you're intelligent. I spoke to a young woman. She's a student, and she said, the name Eti Cohen and the skin of my color makes me have to prove every time, over and over again, interviews, work interviews, dates, that I am intelligent. If I was fair-skinned and if I had a different name, I wouldn't have to prove it all the time. I wouldn't find people looking at me at surprise, oh, so you can speak normally and you're intelligent and you've read books, and she studies philosophy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Talia Sagiv, this is really all very interesting. I do hope, for the sake of our many listeners, that your book On the Fault Line, Israelis of Mixed Ethnicity, will be translated into English very, very, very soon, because it is a very interesting glimpse into somewhat unexplored corner, we should say, in the Israeli political as well as cultural debate currently raging, against all odds. Dr. Talia Sagiv from the Department of Sociology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you too.